Hey, it's me, MLB. This is chapter 25 of Why You, Why Me, and it's titled A Place to Stay. Your mother, father, and grandma were all taken to the hospital in a serious condition, with your two sisters and yourself being treated for minor wounds. You still couldn't feel your legs very well, and the medical team requested that you come to the hospital for an MRI scan to make sure that everything was okay with your bones and nerves. Mitsuki offered to drive you to the hospital, and Katsuki insisted on coming as well, of course. It was a good thing that you'd brought Bakugou's hoodie with you, as he now didn't have a clean shirt on, so he just pulled the hoodie on over his sweaty, chiseled body. Masaru took your sisters back to the Bakugou residence and looked after them until you, Mitsuki, and Katsuki arrived from the hospital. All the scans for your back came back clear, and they cautioned you that it would maybe take a day or two for you to regain full feeling and function of your legs. You were told to come back if it took longer than a week. You made a quick visit to your parents and grandma in their hospital rooms and told them you and your sisters would be staying at the Bakugou's house. By now, they'd found out that your soulmate, Katsuki, was the son of Mitsuki and Masaru, and as you suspected, they were a little shell-shocked, which didn't help the situation. They didn't really have a lot to say about it at the time, though, as there were far more pressing matters to be concerned with, so they approved it on the spot. Your mum had woken as the paramedics were loading her into the ambulance, and she seemed to be okay. She remembered everything and had good speech, so the emergency crew weren't concerned about her well-being. Well, they weren't worried about her having any brain damage, at least. "How are you, sis?" your baby sister Mika asked as you entered the house. She was worried that you couldn't walk properly yet. "I'm going to be okay," you said, smiling down at her from Katsuki's arms. He had insisted on carrying you everywhere and would sneak a kiss on your head or lips whenever he got the chance. He was stoked that you'd be staying at his house for the next few weeks and was glad to have you close so that he could keep an eye on your progress, but he'd never tell you that unless absolutely necessary. He had his pride to keep intact. "You'll stay in my room. I'll sleep in the lounge," Bakugou said gruffly as he placed you gently down on his bed. "Your sisters will stay in the spare room." You kept your arms wrapped around his neck as he placed you down and refused to let go. Can I have a hug for a little longer?" you whispered sadly, burying your face into his chest. "Baby," he whispered lowly back to you. "Are you okay?" You could feel yourself breaking. You hadn't really shed a tear during that whole ordeal, and all your pent-up emotions were coming to the surface. Your man, asking if you were okay in such a deep and caring tone, brought your walls tumbling down and hot tears flooded down your cheeks. You clung to him and sobbed heavily. He seemed to understand that it was just a byproduct of the incident and just held you without saying a word, just letting you cry it out. As you started to calm down, he spoke. "I saw the car. It was out of control," he mumbled, his head bending over yours. "It was headed for the sushi place. I shot an explosion at the car to try and divert its course." His voice trailed off. He clutched you desperately. "I thought I was going to lose you," he whispered, his body starting to shake. You pulled back and looked at him in surprise. He was acting a lot more vulnerable than you'd ever seen him act before. He turned his face away from yours and you heard him sniff. You reached a hand up and touched his cheek. It was wet. You forced his face to look at you and he allowed you to move his head, but he squeezed his eyes shut so you couldn't look him in the eye. He had tears rolling down his cheeks. Your heart broke. You'd never seen Bakugou cry before. You'd seen him slightly vulnerable before, but that was about it. You kissed his tear-stained face and wiped them dry with your hands. "Bakugou, Katsuki, I love you," you whispered quietly, almost regretting the words the minute that they left your mouth. Would he reject you? His eyes shot open, and he stared at you before bending his head and kissing you passionately. You pushed your parted lips back against his, your tongues dancing together, conveying all the unspoken emotions that were still looming overhead. He lay you backwards on the bed and crawled over you, pinning you under his body. He loved being on top of you, and you liked being under the body of such a masculine man. His kisses were passionate, but it didn't hold the same lust that it had at previous times. His kisses were different. His kiss was filled with love. As he pulled away from you, he nuzzled into the side of your neck and kissed you gently. "I love you too, Yin," he said quietly yet confidently. "I have for a long time, and I always will." You hugged him close and enjoyed his warmth before he pulled off you and helped you lie down properly in his bed. "Let me make sure everyone else is good. I'll be back to help you shower." "Whoa, what?" you said, startled. "Help me shower?" "Yeah," he replied with a blank expression. "Can't move properly, so how the hell are you going to be able to shower?" Fair point, you replied with a thoughtful look on your face, but the thought of him being there when you had no clothes on was terrifying. You covered your face with embarrassment. He smirked and chuckled slightly. I'll be back, he said lowly, his tone of voice dripping with seduction. You squealed. And there ends chapter 25. Stay tuned for chapter 26.